I'm Kevin VanOrd, and I approve of this podcast.
Hello, we've saved you a seat. This is Train Station at 8, Episode 3, Symphonic Sensations. So this is a podcast about video game music, and this particular episode is going to be about symphonies and orchestras in video games and what we think about them. So joining me for that today is my brother, Stephen. Hey, Stephen, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing great, but I'm doing even better because joining us today is the Ukrainian Prime Minister, Kevin VanOrd. Hello, Kevin.
You actually went there. Hello, how are you? Is my accent giving it away that I may not be the Ukrainian Prime Minister?
Yeah, you're actually like the Russian Secretary of State or something, right?
Right, that's exactly what I mean.
Russia has a Secretary of State, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's a fine line. The Russian accent and the Ukrainian accent are very similar.
I know, they're so similar. So how are those Olympics going?
You're taking the joke pretty far, Brian, for our guest, Kevin VanOrd, senior editor of GameSpot.
Yeah, great to have you.
Hello, good to be here.
So you have something of a reputation for liking music, even though all of your, I listen to your podcast, and not all of your associates share your love for the music in games.
Well, they don't necessarily share it, but they certainly are subjected to it.
Exactly. Sometimes I'm the guy who just listens to it and is like, I know that answer. Why is no one saying that answer? How does no one know the theme song or the opening song to Shadow of the Colossus, even though you played it twice now?
Well, to be fair, when the tables were turned and I was a guest and not hosting, I don't think I recognized a single tune.
Yeah, it is always easier to do on the outskirts when you're not
Exactly.
So, today's episode is going to be about symphonies and orchestras, like I was saying. But first, I would like to start out with a little bit, just a general question about music in general, which is what music have you been listening to recently? And this doesn't have to be video game music, it can be anything. Mm-hmm. So, Kevin, would you like to start us out here?
Sure. This sort of came from having listened to the Banner Saga, the Banner, I can't even
The Banner Saga?
The Banner Saga soundtrack. Try to say that 5 times in a row. I was impressed by the Banner Saga soundtrack, and it comes from who I believe is the best working composer in video games right now, Austin Wintory. And in turn, that music and rightfully so, because the Banner Saga takes place in Scandinavia, and so rightfully so, it sort of reminded me of the music of Jean Sibelius, the great Finnish composer. And so I've actually been listening to a lot of Sibelius lately, and actually Wednesday night I am going to see the San Francisco Symphony, and one of the pieces performed is the Sibelius Violin Concerto. So I've been listening to a lot of Sibelius. If you don't know Sibelius, probably best known maybe for Finlandia, which is a tone poem. But if you really want to get started in great Sibelius music, listen to his Second Symphony maybe, or his Fifth Symphony, which are incredible. So
okay, I'm going to write that down because
That's awesome. That's not only highly fascinating, but by far the most highbrow answer we have been given for that question so far.
Well, I'm sort of lucky because my education was in violin performance and in music composition. So long before games were that important part of my life, music was a far more important part of my life.
Right.
So.
And I really love it when people can come to like such a huge all-encompassing hobby like video games with the background of another all-encompassing hobby, which is just as interesting and just as vast. And when they combine, interesting things tend to happen.
Yeah, it also gives me a sort of interesting perspective, because I think that when I play games, I notice things that maybe other people don't. Things that are important to me may not be important to somebody else when I play, and so it's just a nice perspective to have.
I mean, I'm just going to be honest. I don't know any of the terminology. I know that a sonata is a Japanese RPG if you put Eternal before it, and that's about as far as I can go.
You had me for a moment. You said, I know a sonata is a Japanese. My mind started going crazy right at that moment, but good save, I will say.
Yeah, sonata is a Japanese poem where it's 5 syllables and then 7 syllables.
Right. And, I just pretty much had to fake it at that point. So
yeah.
I think a great place to start is just to, ask for somebody who knows about this stuff and ask for a list of really great music. One of the problems, I shouldn't say problem, but one of the things that tends to happen is that you end up getting recommended things that I think of as sort of like the pop music of classical music, if you will. And so sometimes you can sort of go into it thinking that classical music all sounds like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, Holst's The Planets, and things like that. And actually, there's just an incredible variety of stuff out there. I think certainly, like in video games, I think there's still a perception that everything's more or less like Super Mario Brothers to people, or just shooting fests.
Well, if you lump an entire history of music into the word classical, you're not really going to get anywhere in actually classifying everything that's there.
Yeah, it's weird too, because if you really want to get technical, the classical period of Western art music only relates to a certain time period during which music was composed. And so really classical music isn't even, I guess you would say, the proper term. Western art music would be probably the more appropriate term, but I'm not going to say Western art music and sound like a snob.
It's a convenient misnomer for our culture, I suppose.
Yes.
It's like trying to do Western RPGs and Japanese RPGs. It's just such a terrible way of labeling things. It's like, what's Dragon's Dogma? I guess it's a Japanese RPG, but it plays like a Western RPG, but it has music like a what the heck?
The wave is pushing me into the current again. I feel the blood in the veins.
At least for
what is Dark Souls? Or even just start getting even more technical. I will hear people refer to, for example, Diablo 3 as a massively multiplayer online game. It's like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
At least in my mind, or I'll hear, people will debate whether Zelda qualifies as an RPG. And so I don't know. I think genre gets to be a little silly, especially during the awards shows, during the DICE Awards or something like that. What's the difference between adventure and action-adventure, or action? Or what's downloadable game mean in this case, when almost every downloadable now? So the whole idea of genre at this stage just is sort of silly to me.
The only thing I use for genres is sorting categories in my Steam library.
Yeah.
I just find that helpful. That's it. I make my own genres and put them in there, but
it's kind of a good sign, though, that video games can't so easily fit into the boxes, right? It's like it just gets harder and harder to do, so ideally they're getting more and more interesting.
Oh yeah, totally. And there's so much crossover at this stage that, you'll hear of things like, it's a shooter with RPG elements, or it's an RPG with strategy elements, or we're just getting to the stage where it doesn't really, they're just games, but I could go on forever about this, and I don't think you want me to do that. Just like I could go on forever about what an indie game is. That's a good subject.
Let's talk about what a game is and whether Gone Home is one. Let's go down.
Okay, you know what, Brian? I like video game music a lot. Maybe we should talk about it.
Hey, good idea.
So let's go on to question 2.
Whoa, you never asked me what I've been listening to.
Oh, that's because I know what you've been listening to, but go ahead.
Yeah,
so question 2 what's question 2?
Man, now I feel really hurt. No, I gotta tell you, I listened to the Thomas Was Alone soundtrack again.
That soundtrack is absolutely fantastic.
Yes, gets me every time.
Is that all you listen to? Just that on loop?
The Twilight Symphony from Zelda Reorchestrated.
Twilight soundtrack, and I'm like, I didn't.
No,
you bought that?
Unfortunately not. I don't own that currently.
Oh, that symphony's great.
It really is.
Do you know what that is, Kevin?
The Twilight Symphony?
It's from the Zelda Reorchestrated folks.
Oh, yeah. Because I actually went to, when the last time the Zelda concert was here in San Francisco, I actually went.
Oh, yeah. That thing is awesome.
So, but yeah, I don't know if I know that one specifically. I don't know if I know the Twilight Symphony specifically.
Yeah, the Twilight Symphony was not actual Nintendo. It was fans who do, Zelda Reorchestrated stuff. And they did a Kickstarter to get a full symphony and choir to do an album of Twilight Princess music.
Nice.
So that was released, what, was it like a couple years ago, Steven?
Oh boy, it might have been that long ago.
Right.
At least a year ago at this point. And sadly, it was their last project. Because most of their principal people went on to do new things, including the Symphony of the Goddesses concert that Nintendo put on. But yeah, they did really, really good work.
Yeah, the quality was just outstanding. Anything else? Was it that helps along?
That's been the main stuff. How about you?
I have been listening to a few different things. None of them particularly video gaming, though. Let's see here. I've been listening to some. I believe the band's name is Solar Fields, kind of like an electronic ambient. And for some reason, I was looking through my iTunes library one day, and I realized I had an album from them, and I don't know why. They're the people who made the soundtrack for Mirror's Edge.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. How are you liking it?
So apparently it's just one guy here. He's a Swedish guy. It is really good. I've had it for quite a while, but I still listen to it from time to time just because it's really relaxing, really atmospheric, and I enjoy it a lot.
That's cool. You know, I only own the Mirror's Edge theme song right now.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I feel like I should buy the full soundtrack and give it a real chance, because that sort of electronic music tends to kind of bore me after a while, but maybe that's just because I've never really allowed myself to appreciate it.
And hopefully he'll be coming back for Mirror's Edge 2, but I don't see anything about that on his Wikipedia page. That'd be good. Let's see what else. I've been listening to more of Hydra, which I talked about before. And of course, on the way home, I was listening to some more Poets of the Fall, because I'm always listening to them.
Yes, yeah. Kevin, do you remember Poets of the Fall?
Yes, absolutely.
Nice. Yeah, Alan Wake was the game, for a lot of people, I think, including us, that introduced us to that band. And Brian and I just kind of fell in love with all of their albums and all of their songs, and we listen to them constantly at this point. And
oh yeah, they're easily my favorite musical group out there. So I'm always listening to them. So anyway, going on to question 2. Stephen, can I move on now? Did I not
yes, you may move on. I am satisfied.
What are some of your favorite composers for orchestral soundtracks?
That's a pertinent question, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to start?
I would like you to start.
Okay, well, I think...
Can we all just say Jeremy Soule so we can, get that off our
just
list?
Get the token composer out of the way. Okay, well, He is on my list.
Can I throw something in there about that, by the way? Since you're bringing Jeremy Soule up.
Okay.
Can I just say that this might be unpopular. I'm going to become a very unpopular person right now.
Careful, Kevin. We might have Jeremy on the show one day.
I know, right? But
go ahead.
There are 2 composers that I admire, and Jeremy Soule is one of them. But I'm particularly bored at this stage by them. And one of them is Jeremy Soule. In part because I feel like there's only one thing he really does. And, I feel like the musical ideas are they fall into a very narrow range. And I feel sort of the same way about Inan Zur.
Oh, yes.
But with Jeremy Soule, I know that kind of makes me unpopular because I actually really admire his work, and I think that the soundtrack to Icewind Dale is one of the best things that's ever been created in the history of things that have been created. But on the other hand, I feel like he's sort of like the John Williams of game music in the sense that when you hear it, you sort of know that you're hearing a Jeremy Soule soundtrack, and depending on your outlook, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. So I'll let you be to it now that I've interrupted and made it all about me.
I'm not sure I feel that Jeremy Soule has such a narrow range. I kind of feel like, especially with Skyrim, he started to branch out a little bit. I more feel that he's kind of a hit or miss composer for me. I honestly think the Elder Scrolls music is some of my favorite music that exists, and I feel like they've all been consistently beautiful.
Yeah.
But then you move to, say, Knights of the Old Republic, and some of the music in that game is just, I don't know, it doesn't do it for me at all. It's really kind of all over the place, and...
Well, he also can't write combat music worth a darn. That isn't the same thing.
That's also true. The combat music, even in Elder Scrolls, is just sort of repetitive drum beats, Yeah. And yet, some of the other songs, move me halfway to tears. I don't know what it is. It's just sometimes he hits it out of the park for me, and sometimes I just couldn't care less. So it's
the comparison to John Williams is actually, I think really apt, and it's something I was thinking when we were talking about Jeremy Soule in our last podcast. I don't remember if I actually said it or not, but that really is an apt comparison because he's great and you have to, John Williams made the Star Wars theme, and Jeremy Soule made the Elder Scrolls theme, and those are some of the most iconic themes for their given mediums, and also some of the best. But at some point, they become less of just an artist making music and more of an artist that puts a specific stamp on all their music, and you can really... You see common threads, which is good, but at some point that starts to run a little thin.
It's kind of comforting in a way. Like, oh, it's a Jeremy Soule score. I know what I'm in for. It's comfort food. But yeah, it does... It can get old.
There's not that much new there if you're listening to a Jeremy Soule song or score.
Maybe a slightly lesser known composer that I would put on here, and this is a Japanese name, so I apologize for all you fluent Japaneseians.
Oh my god. You just called them Japaneseians. Now you have to apologize again.
But no, it's Junichi Nakamura. And he works...
Oh, he was the creator of the Sonata, right?
Yeah. Back. Oh, what hilarity. But no, he worked on a bunch of Soul Calibur stuff.
Yeah. Is he also the Ace Combat guy?
I'm sorry, did I just say Nakamura, or did I say
I don't remember.
Nakatsura?
You said Junichi.
Oh, you got it right. It's Junichi Nakamura.
Or is it?
I
think it's Nakatsuru. I better look this up. Looking up. Okay, I found it.
Is this the same guy who does...
Because Junichi Nakamura is an ice sculptor. Nakatsuru is the video game composer of Ace Combat Soul Calibur.
Well, it's so similar. I always get my ice sculptors mixed up with my video game composers. Give me a break. Oh well. I almost did not make a fool of myself. Anyway.
Alright, yes, he's fantastic, particularly for Ace Combat.
Yes, I'm more of a Soul Calibur fan than an Ace Combat fan when it comes to the music. But they're both great, and I'm just a complete sucker for the entire Soul Calibur series soundtrack. And it's just the most exciting and fun to listen to, sort of half fantasy, very heavy Japanese influence. It's really, really good stuff. And I listen to those soundtracks a heck of a lot more than I play those games, because I'm not very good at the games, but I am great at listening to music.
Yeah, that is a good pick. I didn't have him on there because I forgot his name and didn't take the time to look it up.
Well, apparently I forgot his name too.
I mean, one for me, because of just like one soundtrack I've heard, is Ko Otani, because of Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, I love Shadow of the Colossus music, but can that really count as one of your favorite composers if you've only heard one?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it can, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there, though. Shadow of the Colossus is a true epic.
I mean, yeah, and some of the best music from it is not actually, the fights, but like the intro.
Oh, yeah.
Just the atmosphere he creates is unforgettable.
It's one of the, whenever those notes strike up from that intro sequence, I'm just immediately transported to that specific place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just remember that moment, like, just hearing that opening, all I can think of is that bridge when, you see the bridge and it's so lonely and it takes forever to cross it, and just immediately I'm brought there.
Mm-hmm. And he really, for a game that is so, looking for the right words, has such a tight rein on its spectrum of emotions.
Rein.
Oh, kind of funny, I guess.
Yeah.
Has such a specific, artistic style to it.
Yeah.
He's able to coax a pretty decent range of emotions from the soundtrack. Like, that music can really jump around us in different places, and that's just plain impressive.
Yes, absolutely, I agree. I'm trying to find the guy, and maybe one of you know his name, who started doing stuff for, like, Mario Galaxy.
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Because I think he did a great... Maybe Mahito Yokota? Or Yokota?
Do you happen to know if he's the same person who's been continuing to work on games like 3D World?
I don't, but I can look that up.
Because I know that 3D World really started to sound similar to Galaxy in certain respects, and I was just wondering...
Yeah, he worked on it as well, so I think Mahito Yokota...
If only there were a publicly available electronic database of information like this, but...
I know, I'm pulling this all from my memory. I'm totally not sitting here in front of a computer with the internet. Like finding these names.
You'd be surprised that I actually did a little bit of research before this show.
I wanted to, but I was busy up until literally the minute we started.
Yeah, that's true.
So, Yes.
I'm afraid I didn't do much research. I peed before I called, and
Well, that's really appreciated.
but I didn't even bother to put on pants. So,
Well, I somewhat. Well, it's not a video podcast, so we're good for now. But I somewhat subscribe to the Giant Bomb methodology of enough research ruins a podcast, which has always been the motto for the Giant Bombcast. So they're successful.
Well, I just wanted to make sure I got that ice sculptor's name right, or else I would have been real embarrassed.
Exactly.
I want to throw one more composer down here on my list, though. Could
one
not
said
get
to
through
boot
this
him up,
without mentioning Grant Kirkhope, who to this day thinks he is a bad composer, but that is a complete lie.
yeah.
You have any others, Kevin?
Oh, yes. I mentioned Austin Wintory already, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But just to throw out another nod, because not only did he write the Banner Saga, but he also wrote Journey, as well as Monaco, What's Mine Is Yours, from last year. And what's most interesting about those three soundtracks is that if you were to listen to them, you would never guess in a million years that the same person had written them. And that's phenomenal to me, especially if you take something like Journey and put it up against Monaco. They're both incredible soundtracks, and I don't know how he does it. I simply don't know how he does it. So I greatly admire Austin Wintory. Jesper Kyd is somebody who needs mention as somebody who's written the soundtracks for, say, Assassin's Creed and Assassin's Creed 2, and so on and so forth. He's very prolific, but also relatively diverse.
Yeah, we talked about him on our last episode, primarily for his work on Darksiders 2, which I really enjoyed.
Oh, yeah. Darksiders 2 soundtrack is great. Don't forget Hitman and games like that. So, he's fantastic.
He's great.
And another person to throw out that I think doesn't get nearly the amount of attention he deserves is French composer Olivier Derivière. And he wrote this most recently, I think Remember Me is his most recent soundtrack.
Oh, right.
But it's really, really good. As in, it was my favorite soundtrack of 2013.
I actually bought that game because I had heard a sample.
Yeah, it's really amazing, and I'm trying to think of what else he did. I remember he did Obscure, and that's the first time I was familiar with him, because I reviewed Obscure 2. One of my earlier assignments was this horror game for the Wii U, and the soundtrack was incredible. The game was not. But he's amazing, and I think he also did Alone in the Dark. And I think we're going to see him become suddenly more successful, not just because of Remember Me, but he also did the Assassin's Creed 4 DLC. And so I suspect that he may very well join the ranks of the great composers over the next few years. So
that is very cool.
I'm
only barely aware of his existence right now, but like you said, if he's moving on to stuff like Assassin's Creed, then it probably won't be too long until his name starts coming up more, which has got to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Who does the music for Metal Gear?
Oh, that is film composer. Man, now I have to look it up, because he's a very prolific game and film composer, and a very, very well-known composer, and suddenly I forgot his name.
Is it Harry Gregson Williams? No.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
You're right.
Right.
Yep.
Williams.
There we go.
Yes, it is him. And he writes very boisterous music for Metal Gear.
I love the music in that.
Did he also write the Snake Eater theme? Because then I might need to track him down and give him a high five.
I don't think he wrote that theme.
Okay.
Snake Eater, the theme song is the best part of that game. Ironically, the part where you're climbing the ladder, yet you hear the theme song, might be the worst part of that game. It's just, what? I just I didn't get that game.
If I remember, because I think Tapi Iwase did the Metal Gear theme, because he wrote that theme that was used later And he also wrote music for Suikoden, I think.
Huh.
Oh, what? Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, so yeah, but he hasn't actually done much. I'm actually I just now decided to look this up, and apparently he plagiarized the motif for Metal Gear from a piece by Russian composer
Yep.
Georgy Sviridov. I did not know this until just now.
Oh, breaking news.
And MGS4 did not use that theme,
Oh,
apparently, and it will no longer be used because of that.
Yeah, I'd heard it was stolen, but I didn't think they actually did anything about it. Wow.
Yeah. Is this a good time to bring up the other plagiarized music? Well, not plagiarized music, but kind of fake music thing that came up last week. Did you guys hear about the Japanese composer?
Oh, yeah, we alluded to it last time.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to
deep.
derail things. I just thought it was an interesting.
I never read much about the story, but did all that stuff turn out to be true about him? That he just faked it all?
As far as I can tell, yes.
Wow.
And, I mean, just as a note for the audience, we're not quite sure when this particular episode is going to come out, so it's probably a few weeks old, this news.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, the guy from Resident Evil, right?
Well, he wrote the score for like the DualShock edition of Resident Evil, and he wrote Onimusha. I think were his two big projects in games.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So yeah, moving on to question 3. Have you ever been surprised to hear an orchestrated game? Which I guess is the idea of, is there a game where you didn't think they'd use an orchestra and then, they ended up doing so? Now I want to go back to question 2 again and say whoever the composer of Nier's soundtrack was.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you know what? Yeah.
I mean, none of us actually know the name of that person, of course. But
I don't remember his name, but Nier is my favorite soundtrack. It's too bad you had to bring it up now, because I was going to bring it up later. But it is my
we can bring it up later.
Of the generation of music.
Ooh.
All right, yeah, we'll talk about that more when the time comes to talk about soundtracks we love. But right now, any other surprises of an orchestra? Like, wow, that's a lot of instruments when I was expecting just 3.
Viva Pinata, as I already alluded to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I talked about this on one of our past podcasts, but
Yeah.
If you don't know what you're getting into on that game, you would never suspect for this pastoral symphony to be playing in this, kids game, right? It's like you would think that it would just be filled with generic sound effects and forgettable background music.
Well, no, you wouldn't, because on the cover art you would see the Rare logo.
Logos.
Okay,
then that's
yes.
what one might think. Man, I don't know what gave Grant Kirkhope the idea to give it such a lovely and strangely serious sound. Even his other stuff has been of excellent quality, but it's all been super goofy, like cartoony and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But he got a real orchestra for this, and it's like beautiful, like memorable music. I mean, it's one of my all-time go-to soundtracks at this point.
Best game of 2006. You heard it here.
Since I can't actually remember what else came out that year, I'm going to agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Gears of War.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 12.
Was Oblivion 2006?
Maybe?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, I think Viva Pinata still might have been better.
Yeah,
so,
I think probably so.
All right. Your opinion holds, Kevin.
Whoop.
Celebratory sound. And my last one is Mario 3D World. Coming in from Mario 3D Land.
I was gonna say that. No, that's all I have to say. Continue.
Okay. I will just say that I'm so happy to hear a haunted house theme in a Mario game that has, if I remember correctly, some haunting cellos, and that's enough for me.
Yeah, that was a fantastic song. A game for me was Rayman Legends.
Ooh, good point. Yeah.
I didn't expect the level of awesomeness that game had.
That was one of those games where I would die because I was listening to the music so intently.
Yeah, I mean, orchestral music was just like a part of it. Every level would have its own distinct music style, and I don't know how they crammed so much into that game and did it all so very well.
Well, it's like the gameplay would, shift at the blink of an eye, And so with the soundtrack. The soundtrack would just follow doggedly everything that game did, especially the musical levels.
Mm-hmm.
That was crazy, and it was all such high quality. Yeah, that was a fun experience.
All right, so you got any more of those, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm going to throw one more out, and it's not so much that it's a surprise that there were live orchestral musicians as much as there was such an emphasis on it. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say Halo ODST.
Oh.
Which I think has an amazing soundtrack, but I think what's most interesting about it are the moments where you're fighting, and instead of hearing typical game battle music or even Halo battle music, instead what you're hearing is very quiet, swooning orchestral music that sort of matches the tone of the environment rather than the fact that you're fighting, because it's amazing what they did there in terms of what would seem to be a contradiction between the tone of the game and of the action and the tone of the music, but it's perfect.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't actually noticed that, but now that I think back on it, it did have this it kept that sense of atmosphere up even into and out of battles, which I think helped make it more fluid.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw that one in there as something that surprised me in terms of its focus on orchestral music.
Yeah, its use of it.
Yeah, that's actually a really good one. Even the gameplay, it still plays a lot like Halo, and I wouldn't think that a soundtrack like that would really fit a Halo game, but it managed to toe the line between you're still getting a lot of percussion, you're still getting exciting battle music, but like you said, it hits that dark, almost noir theme that they were striving for.
Right.
Very, very well.
It's the bits where you're exploring and you're looking for the signs of the, it's the framing gameplay as opposed to the, going back and experiencing what had led to this moment gameplay. It's just, I don't know, it's just really good.
Probably my only regret with that game, and one reason I think I didn't quite get the experience everyone else did, is I played through it in multiplayer, which made those sections kind of just hectic and confusing. Rather than as atmospheric.
Especially in split screen, it's hard to see in that dark city.
Yeah. And the sense of, loneliness is kind of less if there's a guy next to you saying, "Come on, let's go!"
Yeah.
Kill some grunts.
Yeah, no, totally. It's totally weird, but, yeah.
I think they wanted to make a single-player game there, but they're like, we can't alienate all of our Halo fans, so we'll put that in.
Yeah.
Alright, so on to question 4. Have you ever wished a game would use an orchestra? A game that didn't?
Nintendo first-party games.
Yeah, okay, that's it. We're done with this question.
Funnily enough, that's how we ended the what games do you wish had soundtrack releases? Was all Nintendo.
Yeah, that's true.
First-party games.
Hey, back to Twilight Princess, right?
Yep, and so Skyward Sword's like, we're getting an orchestra in for 2 songs, and then you can listen to MIDI for the rest, or whatever they use.
As a composer, that stuff really stands out to me, too. There are some composers that do it really well. Like, a lot of Jeremy Soul's music that does not use live orchestra is still a very, very reasonable facsimile, for example. But, Nintendo stuff is almost proudly that way.
Yeah.
And even, a lot of Square's Final Fantasy stuff is kind of proudly that way, which can sort of get to me. It's another thing too that gets me whenever I hear the Game of Thrones intro. Because I really want to just grab somebody by the throat and shake them and say, how did you let the composer of your main theme not use live musicians? And that's a story for another day. But yeah, Nintendo. So that's the answer to this question.
Have you listened to the Fire Emblem Awakening soundtrack much?
I have not, actually.
It sounds very beautiful, actually.
It sounds a lot better than, say, Path of Radiance or other Nintendo games that have tried to do that.
Yeah.
So if they're still doing it fake, they're doing it much better. But I think that one might actually be an orchestra.
And I feel like sometimes Nintendo has this tendency to, like you said, Brian, hire an orchestra for 3 songs. They did the same thing with Zelda recently. It'd be so nice if they could, take the time to create the whole soundtrack with this even quality.
Agreed. So yeah, answer to 3. for Nintendo.
Oh, but we can't forget about the great crime that was the Rogue Squadron games. Particularly Rebel Strike, where you would have...
we're not going to use Star Wars music, darn it, and we don't have a
there
budget.
was authentic John Williams music in that game.
I know, but they wanted to add their own stuff.
Yes, and then they'd say, but for this level, we want to make our own song.
Oh, man. It sounded like a guy just jamming on a Yamaha keyboard and just saying, good enough.
It was, I mean, even years ago when I wasn't paying as much attention to music, I noticed that. And that was not cool. Really took you out of the moment.
All right, so question number 5. Have you ever felt an orchestra in a game is unnecessary? And this isn't just a live orchestra, but, going for a classical or symphonic or orchestral sound when a game could have gone for something else.
I puzzled over this question for a while and couldn't come up with anything, actually.
I was the same way when Brian first mentioned it. I'm like, isn't the answer never? I thought up an answer or two.
Okay. Ooh. I have some too.
And I think one of them was Knight's Journey of Dreams. Because the original Knights obviously did not have an orchestra. But it's one of my favorite game soundtracks ever. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just kind of... I guess if magic had a sound, that would be it. And I respect them for taking this very dramatic symphonic bent for the sequel. Just doesn't hold up.
I think that might be one of my problems with orchestral symphonies is if they're not done well, I think it's very easy to make them sound dull or just similar to everything else out there. Mm-hmm. That's why I think a poorly done orchestral soundtrack can sometimes be worse than going for just another style.
Because if you don't have a vision and a mastery over the instruments you're calling into whatever piece you're creating, then it kind of just sounds like audio sludge, right?
Every modern shooter kind of just sounds like a Hans Zimmer knockoff.
Right.
Strings mean something exciting is happening, drums mean something intense is happening, and when the notes get really high, you're supposed to start crying. It's it doesn't just work like that.
Right, and some examples I had, or for me, is I don't think Sonic Lost World needed to orchestrate its main theme. It was just kind of ripping off Mario at that point. Sonic has always had its own style.
Are we talking Lost World?
Lost World and Sonic Colors.
And World Adventure, or...
Not World Adventure.
Unleashed? You liked Unleashed?
I don't remember. No, that was kind of a problem too.
Oh, okay.
Sonic orchestrating his theme songs feels like it's not his style. Sonic is very much to rock, very much a...
I think Knuckles is in charge of that.
Yeah, Knuckles, Tails, Amy, it's a quartet with Cream.
You can't let Knuckles around the stringed instruments, though, because he tends to break strings a lot.
He's all Knuckles.
Don't call me Knuckles for nothing, I get loose.
Let's talk about the Sonic redesign still. Let's not actually do
Let's not. Okay.
Yes, just in general, I think that it's not, it feels like it's compromising Sonic's usual musical style when he just kind of does a generic orchestral.
So if I may, I'm going to throw out two thoughts onto this one. Not because I think that necessarily orchestral music was bad, but I think it was the wrong kind of thing. And I think that's sort of maybe what you were touching on with maybe Knights a little bit. Because I think a good composer can do almost anything with, just because you have all of the instruments doesn't mean you should use all of the instruments at every
Right.
Every moment. But there are a couple soundtracks that can that rub me the wrong way. One of the biggest is Fallout 3. And this comes up a lot in my mind because I look to BioShock, the original BioShock, as a great example of how you can use original music along with retro music in a way that is perfectly balanced, whereas you don't necessarily notice the break from one to another, like the ambient music and sort of the retro music sort of go together and they all just weave sort of one cohesive thing. Fallout 3 really drives me crazy because they use some really great tunes, from the back in the day, from the 50s.
So bongo, 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 I don't wanna leave the Congo, no, 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 no.
And then you get this music that doesn't belong at all, because it sounds like it belongs to Elder Scrolls. And I'm walking around the wasteland thinking, why does the music make it seem like it should be so pretty out here? And I have real issues with the Fallout 3 music. I think it's completely tonally deficient, and whenever anybody praises the Fallout 3 music, I get a little excitable.
It almost seems like they should have just relied on the radio for their music, and then just...
Yeah, I think part of the problem is disk space in a case like this, because the great thing about an Elder Scrolls game is that everything is... There are no cutscenes, and so video files don't actually take up... they take up a lot of space on discs in games, and they didn't have to do that. But that's still, they didn't have a whole lot of space to use for sound, and developers come up with all sorts of different techniques to deal with that, whether it be the quality, whether it be the amount, or in the case of something like Far Cry 2, they actually sped up some of the dialogue files.
That's awesome.
So I don't know if you've ever played Far Cry 2.
No,
Play it sometime and pay close attention to the voice acting. I think you'll be very surprised. But Fallout 3 is one of those examples where I think that they could have just done without a lot of the music. It just doesn't match. But then the other thing you have to remember too is sort of like the way there are Oscar bait movies. There's sort of like Oscar bait game soundtracks in the sense that there are things that are remarkably generic and big, and people tend to praise those kinds of things, even though they're not really bringing a whole lot.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
And StarCraft 2 sort of comes to mind. Actually, anything Blizzard sort of comes to mind. It's all very wonderful in that incredibly generic and epic way.
Right.
But having played so much StarCraft 2, I wouldn't know StarCraft 2 if you played it for me right now.
I think I would have a couple caveats of Blizzard stuff. I think that's true of some of Diablo stuff. I think it's true definitely of the orchestral StarCraft stuff. I think like Terran music is pretty distinct.
Yeah, Terran does have that sort of country twang to it.
Like they almost have a Firefly soundtrack for Terran.
Yeah, but that's where my problem comes, is I might think it's from Firefly.
Right. Well, StarCraft came first.
Space Cowboy thing sort of done, so
yeah, that is true. I mean, StarCraft 1 kind of had it going before that, but that's true. I do agree that Blizzard kind of like all of their ideas come from kind of taking it from somewhere else and making it bigger and louder. I do think some of those stuff, like in Lament to the Highborn and the music they did for the Blood Elves and Draenei and Burning Crusade, was really original stuff.
You just sort of described the entire Blizzard design aesthetic. Actually, not just their music, but everything.
Yeah.
I think Blizzard tends to like mine from sort of a generic, almost like Creative Commons, like, Chris Metzen is sort of the epitome of that, right? Like, he's just, he doesn't care what anyone thinks about his story about orcs. He just thinks they're awesome. But the music is kind of the same way. That was actually on my list, though. Interesting that you brought it up. I love the World of Warcraft soundtrack, no doubt. Probably one of my favorites. But especially the pieces that Cataclysm introduced. I feel like they got so carried away at making them grand and majestic and emotional that it seems like someone just died next to me or something. Like something. It's like trying to pull at my heartstrings at times that it no longer means anything.
Yeah,
I think Jason Hayes was a little more restrained than some of Russell Brower's later pieces. That said, Russell Brower is the best person in the world. So.
But in general, I agree that Blizzard is best when they're not just making, hey, it's an orchestral piece. Like, I think the theme song to Diablo, the theme songs to StarCraft, and a lot of the stuff in Cataclysm, which is like very bombastic orchestral stuff. When they're at their best is when they're making something original, like they did for the Blood Elves, or they did for, in other styles, like they did for Pandaria. And that's when they kind of shine more of, is when they start kind of trying to do other styles than just generic fantasy or grandeur. All right, So I'm going to move on here to question number 5. I just did 5, so question number 6. I don't know why. Okay. What orchestrations affect your emotions the most?
I'll throw out a couple. If
Yeah,
I
go
may.
ahead.
Oh, my mouth is now next to my microphone again.
Oh, cool.
Excellent.
I'm going to throw out Dreamfall: The Longest Journey as one of the ones for me. The music is from Leon Willett, who did not actually compose the music in the original Longest Journey, and actually you could potentially put this soundtrack as one of those ones that deserved an orchestra that didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
But you wouldn't necessarily know when you listen to it because he has full control over the synthesized orchestra, and it really moves me. It moves me to tears every time. And actually, lots of Funcom games tend to do that for me because I'll listen to some of the music from Anarchy Online, which is my favorite MMO still to this day, and I will hear the ambient music or I will hear the battle music, and I immediately know what it's from. I immediately know what I felt like when I was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really interesting that Funcom has this way about them when it comes to music that just hits all the right buttons. I don't know how they do it, but they do.
I actually recently acquired the Anarchy Online soundtrack. I haven't played the game in a very long time. But there are a few, surprising pieces.
It's really interesting because, for example, again, we all have those games where we hear the music and suddenly it's like we're transported back to that moment.
Mm-hmm.
A few things do, like the Deus Ex opening theme will do that to me. But there's something really interesting about the Anarchy Online music because it isn't just taking you back to the game. It actually takes me back to very specific things that I did in the game and specific places I was in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of MMOs. But that is the only game where a piece of music will immediately take me to that one place doing that one thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there aren't games that sound like that, and there aren't games that are in a place like that. And so I think that has a lot to do with it, just the singular nature of both the music and the game.
Yeah, that is super neat to hear. That's some of my favorite examples of memorable music is when, we had a whole podcast about this, right? Like last time with Dan Floyd. When music can take you back to a specific time in your life or a specific time in a game.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
One of the soundtracks I would choose would be Twilight Princess again. And mostly just because of that ending, credits suite that they play. I just remember beating that game and wishing that it wasn't over. And that music just has this way of exploring all of the old places you have already been and all of the adventures you have been on. And then there's just this utter finality. Finality
is a word, I believe. Go with it.
It's like, this is the end, capital T, capital E, and you're gonna have to wait until the next game. And that music just captures that emotion perfectly. So
it's really a shame that the next game ended up being Skyward Sword.
That is a bit of a shame. That's why I just like listening to the Twilight Princess soundtrack. I feel like Soul Calibur can do that in the same way, except that rather than remind me of the game, it just kind of reminds me of the music itself, because I tend to like the soundtrack more than the game.
So, let's see. I'm trying to think if there's a game orchestra that really hits me emotionally. Like the Elder Scrolls theme song does, from Morrowind especially.
Yeah.
I think that's an easy choice. But
no doubt. I always get this sort of, swell of adventure and tinged with sadness somehow in that theme song.
To go back a little bit on the Blizzard talk, the theme song, or the original intro movie to World of Warcraft still is fantastic for me, because I can just see that entire movie going through all the races and all the different events in my head whenever I hear it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that World of Warcraft, it ties in directly with nostalgia because it's been going on so long. We've been playing it for so long. It's
much like Anarchy Online for you, Kevin. You know that World of Warcraft is the one MMO I've gotten really into, so it's the one that will remind me of different places I've been and things I've done with the soundtrack from there.
I actually find it very interesting, though, when you can disconnect from the nostalgia, and the music is, like, that's the way Viva Pinata is for me. I like that game a lot. I did not truly appreciate the soundtrack until listening to it after the fact.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, most of the other ones we've actually already gone through stuff like Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh geez, that final Colossus, track.
Yeah, the despair they get through in that.
It sounds, like you said, it has this sound of despair. It reeks of hopelessness. It's not fun to listen to.
No, but it is a super good piece. So you got any others, Kevin?
Not that I can. Well, I mean, there's always music that will move me in whatever way, but I think that's probably the best example of it that I can think of. Journey would. I mean, I feel bad because we already brought it up, so that's why I didn't bring it up again. But Journey,
feel free,
can actually get me really teary just hearing the music. Nothing is as good as that. So.
Very true. Yeah,
all right.
That's cool.
All right, then. So question 7, and this is going to be the last orchestral-related question, and that is, what are some of your favorite orchestrations we haven't had the chance to talk about yet?
Hey, I'm gonna pop up here with Battle for Middle-earth 2.
That's an interesting choice that, I completely forgot about.
And the reason I want to point it out is because that is not Howard Shore doing the music, but the guy who did it, let me look it up real quick. Battle for Middle-earth. Jamie
Natsubara?
But unfortunately not. Okay, I'm going to pronounce this right.
Okay.
Jamie Christopherson. Apparently.
Why that name cracks me up. It does. That soundtrack was great. I heard it way too much when I played that game. Way too much.
Yeah. It can sound, sometimes it does venture into generic fantasy, but it sticks real close to that Shore ideal. And that's pretty
It sure does.
Oh, wow. I don't applaud that.
Oh, fine. Be a wet blanket like that. I thought it was great. Oh man, I'm trying to think of other. I mean, we've kind of run the gambit in ones.
I know we've gone all over the place.
All right, Kevin, you want to talk about Nier now?
Nier.
That was a near miss.
Nier, I mean, and this is the problem when talking about, when limiting ourselves to talking about orchestral game soundtracks, because so many soundtracks have a full range of musical ideas at their disposal beyond the orchestra, or combine orchestra with other musical idioms that may or may not be traditionally orchestral. But Nier has a lot of choral music.
Yes, that's true.
And a lot of vocal music, and a lot of just non-orchestral music, things that are electronic sounds that are mainly percussive and produced from various electronic means that aren't really, orchestral. But that soundtrack is amazing, and I am on record as not really caring for Nier all that much. Much to
Were you the one who reviewed it?
What's that?
Were you the one who reviewed it?
I was.
Okay.
And I did not. I thought Nier was a very problematic, relatively ugly game with lots of backtracking for no apparent reason, and very boring, and action that didn't work well, and it was really easy, but it also was full of ideas, and so people love Nier in part because it's full of ideas. But regardless of how you feel about the game, I think the soundtrack is universally considered to be amazing, and I will be up there. And what's great about it, I think most great soundtracks work both in their context in the game and outside of the context of the game. And that's one of those soundtracks that I think is obviously more amazing when you're playing the game and it's matched up to whatever's happening on screen, but it's almost as amazing just listening to it outside of that. And another soundtrack that I really love that's also not really orchestral, but does have some orchestral elements, is Howard Drawson's soundtrack for Afro Samurai.
Oh, never heard that.
Which at GameSpot, we actually ended up giving that our soundtrack of the year that year. I forget what year. I'm old. So all the years together. But we did, and it's interesting because there's a lot of hip hop, but there's also a lot of other kind of musical language in there. And it's just, it's this really interesting mixture of, hey, it's hip hop, but it's also sounds Japanese, but hey, it also sounds classical, and how does it sound like all of these things at one time?
That sounds completely genius. For some reason, that description has 100% made me want to listen to the soundtrack.
I guess I really don't have anything else to add, although Howard Drawson does sort of deserve a shout out for not just Afro Samurai, but the Baldur's Gate 2 expansion and other stuff. Like, I'm sure it sounded like you really loved the orchestral soundtracks for games like, Sonic and the Black Knight, and
I was going to mention that exact one when you were done talking. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's one of those games that no one will ever play, but the music is totally worth listening to.
But you had a great point, Kevin. Where we had the question like this near the end of most of our podcasts, and it is tough to just think of all of the awesome soundtracks that are in games here. It's never going to think of. So I figured I'd just go through every single game that's been released ever and just list them off here real quick.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to start out in games that were in January 2013. We're just going to go back to the years. So Retro City Rampage, Unchained Blades, Anarchy Reigns, Earth Defense Force 2017, Field Runners 2,
I'm pretty sure
Corpse
Kevin
Party,
has all even were good.
DMC Devil May Cry, Temple Run 2, Super Hexagon, The Cave,
Hey, can we add Dark Souls to that list of games that needed to be more fully orchestrated?
Yeah, actually we can.
Man, now I gotta go back and change. We gotta record this whole thing again.
Yeah, okay.
I wasn't recording from the beginning, so...
Aw, damn!
This is just a trick. There is no podcast. We just want to talk
There is no
to somebody.
podcast!
So, we get people on the phone. Yeah.
It has just been an excuse to talk to interesting people, so... we may never put this stuff up on the internet. Yeah. And Mercenaries has an awesome soundtrack. Okay.
Oh man, I'm looking at into this list. Dr. Luigi, I bet that has a great soundtrack.
Real orchestral grandeur right there.
I have not played that game yet.
Alright, well I think we've covered about two...
Oh, I forgot. There's a great original soundtrack in Peggle, where you get the fever.
That's a good point, Brian. Thanks for bringing that up.
Best original music goes to Peggle. Alright, and I think, that should cover it then. So the last question here is a pretty simple one, which is just, what have you been working on? What sorts of projects do you want to plug?
It's a loaded question. I do a lot of things for my job, as it happens.
Okay.
Right now, as we record this, and again, if this goes up on the internet, this will be late. This will be old news. Currently, I am banging out all of this stuff related to Lightning Returns, Final Fantasy. So I wrote my review last week, and it's ready to go up on Tuesday. But in the meanwhile, I'm putting together a boss battle guide, which has ended up being a lot more involved than I anticipated. I'm on my first playthrough of the game.
I wish we had time to talk about that, because I've always wanted to know the process that goes into making those guides. Like, they just look really terrifying and exhausting to me.
Well, it's the first time I've ever actually written anything like this that wasn't just, I'm not doing a whole walkthrough of the game, because I would probably lose my mind, and I think that game guides writers deserve medals for what they do. I don't even know who decided that was a good thing to do in their spare time. Actually, let alone, I don't even want to do it and get paid for it. But yeah, I'm working. But I am doing like a boss guide, and now, but at least nobody can say, "Hey, you didn't play enough Final Fantasy Returns." I've played it 3 times now.
Kevin, someone's still going to say that.
Yeah, well, you just wait. I can't say anything on this podcast, but you just wait. Either I'm going to be the most loved or the most hated man on earth. You just never. Well, I am already, I guess, but.
Well, as long as you're one of those things, you'll be remembered.
That's
so
true.
do you ever get a lot of praise for giving something a negative review?
Yes,
Oh,
that has
interesting.
happened before. If I say negative things about a game that's universally considered to not be good, sometimes that can happen.
Yeah.
It particularly happens if there's a game or a series that has done wrong by PC gamers in particular.
Uh-huh.
They
There you
really
go.
love to jump on that bandwagon, and a great example is X Rebirth, which I reviewed at the end of 2013, which is a pretty universally reviled game in the X series. And if you've never heard of the X series, it's a bunch of space combat and trading simulators, and they're widely loved by PC gamers, especially because there are too few games like that exist now.
Oh, yeah.
And
I was
this
excited about
was a travesty. This game was a travesty through and through. And it was one of those few times where I gave something a 2.
Yep.
And everybody was very happy. Another great example is when we just review something that's just clearly awful and abysmal, and people don't care about the game itself. They just want to jump in and join the bandwagon, even though they have no... A few good examples was reviewing Stalin vs. Martians, Rogue Warrior was... if anybody remembers that one,
yeah,
that
I
was
do
the
remember
game
that.
where Mickey Rourke did a voice, and it had the most creative swearing besides Bulletstorm I'd ever heard, so that's good at least.
Yeah, it's funny how I have never planned to play any of those games either, but I still remember, like, oh yeah, that one was the borderline offensive terrible RTS about Stalin. Oh, that one was the
That was
dumb...
great.
Wait, I remember another horrible RTS. Was it Stormrise? Is that the name of it?
Oh,
Which one?
Xbox.
Stormrise? Like it was made by...
Oh, Stormrise was...
Yeah.
Oh my god. See, that was tough because so there's a difference in reviewing a game that's just awful for awful's sake and you can make fun of it, and a game that's so awful that it's frustrating to play and harmful to your health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't get how...
Stormrise is the kind of game that makes you feel terrible in your mind and in your body. Stalin vs. Martians is the kind of bad that is sort of like Big Rig's bad.
I was thinking of Big
where
Rig.
it's not like hurting you internally. It's just so bad you can't believe it was released.
What's crazy to me about Stormrise is Creative Assembly is really great developer. Sometimes.
They're great as long as they're only making Total War games. But seriously, anything that they make that's not Total War is usually pretty not good, which is why I don't know what to think of the upcoming Alien game.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm hopeful because we need good Alien games. You know, we need good games in the Alien universe, but they've never made anything good that wasn't Total War.
Well, Kevin, technically GameSpot gave Spartan Total Warrior a 7.1. So
we said it was...
your site? You said it was good.
Fairly good. I don't agree on Spartan War, and I remember... I'm sorry to get way off on tangents. I remember when Aaron Thomas reviewed Viking.
I remember that, yeah.
Asgard, and he gave it a 5 or something. And a lot of people didn't like him for giving that game a 5. He gave that game exactly the right score. That game was as boring as can be. But I, like, open world games that do nothing with their open world is kind of a pet peeve of mine anyway.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
Mafia 2, I've heard is bad about that. And others. Okay, this is weird. I did not know this, but Creative Assembly are the guys who put together the Sonic Classic Collection on the DS. I guess Sega was just running out of people.
That one was real bad, too.
Yeah. What's wrong with these people?
I don't know. That's a sad state of affairs right there.
And
Somebody's
even their Total War games are terribly optimized. Like, they just gotten
They
more
are.
down over time. So I wonder if, like, oh man, they really need some new ideas in that developer.
Yeah. The reason they can get away with it is sort of like the reason Bethesda sort of gets away with a lot of the problems they have, is that there's nothing else that does it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
I mean, there are...
The basis is great.
Yeah. I mean, there are big RPGs and there are big strategy games, but none of them do basically the way that those developers do it. And so that's why I think Elder Scrolls Online is interesting. Again, I'm going off on a tangent, but like now they're getting into a space where there's a shitload of competition. Like, what do you now? What do they do? Like, you can't get away with this anymore in this space. You can get away with it in the other space because there's nothing else that we can play that's like that.
Yeah, I do. I have my severe doubts about that game. Totally hope it's good, but I think it's just going to be another one of the MMOs that doesn't stand out for any particular reason and kind of languishes much. It's the Old Republic with a Elder Scrolls skin, pretty much.
Although I did really like the Old Republic.
And I feel like the Old Republic.
I don't mean it's a bad game,
but it was like reaching for something different. At least they were saying we're going to be about story. I don't.
That's a good point. I just mean in terms of performance and lasting legacy. It's just kind of. I don't think that model can support this kind of thing anymore.
Well, Elder Scrolls Online is about being Elder Scrolls. That's the only hook.
Yeah, but it doesn't play like it, and people are going to realize that. I mean,
no. Well, people are like having played a bunch now, and I'm allowed to talk about it because because I'm allowed. not fully. I haven't reviewed it. It's not reviewable yet. I've only played like a dozen plus hours or whatever of beta. But I feel like I can safely say that. Oh yeah, it's definitely Elder Scrolls, and it feels like an Elder Scrolls place. And sometimes it plays like Elder Scrolls. The problem is that it plays sort of like a 75% Elder Scrolls, and then it plays like a 75% MMO. So it's like you sort of get 3/4 of the way there to being fully what it is on one side, and sort of 3/4 of the way there on the other side. And so you're not like fully satisfying on either end.
Right.
Because you can't quite... Like, Elder Scrolls just doesn't translate in every way to online, because when you share a universe with other people, it changes.
But yeah, bringing that back to music, I'm curious here real quick. What is the music like in Elder Scrolls Online? Or did you hear much of it?
It's Elder Scrolls.
But it's not Jeremy Soule.
Oh, I don't know who the composer is. It can't be Jeremy Soule, because Jeremy Soule has now signed officially and exclusively to SOE.
Oh, really?
For all SOE MMOs will be done by Jeremy Soule now.
Wait, isn't he still doing stuff for Guild Wars 2?
I don't think new stuff will be done by Jeremy Soule for Guild Wars 2. Because when they announced, one of the big things they announced when they announced EverQuest Next was that the only MMOs Jeremy Soule would be working on from that point forward would be SOE MMOs. So
that's like tying the NFL up for Madden.
Yeah.
Tying Jeremy Soule up for MMOs. Jeez. Alright, well that's cool. Anyway, we should probably wrap this thing up here now. So anything else you've been working on that you want to talk about, Kevin? You have a podcast, right?
I do. You should listen to GameSpot Gameplay and subscribe to GameSpot Gameplay. And you should tell people about GameSpot Gameplay. You should listen to it every day, even when you sleep, especially when you go to the bathroom and you need to listen to something, do that.
But have you mentioned what GameSpot Gameplay is called?
It's called GameSpot Gameplay.
What's that again?
Just making sure we got that title in there. GameSpot Gameplay?
GameSpot Gameplay?
Have I mentioned that it's called GameSpot Gameplay?
And this
no,
is
you hadn't.
By the website www.gamestop.com, right?
Stop it! I am not ever going to forgive you for that.
Oh, I made a terrible mistake. I was weighing the options. Should I grief Kevin
the funny thing is, sometimes in the office, one of us will do that by mistake, because it'll just come out of our mouths wrong.
Yep.
And we're like, and then we become just like the people we hate.
Yes.
So yeah. So that's what I'm doing. What are you guys doing?
Well, we're doing this podcast called Train Station at 8, a video game podcast.
So, I wanted a quick poll here. Do you know what Train Station at 8 is referencing?
No, but I assume that it had... I like that you sent 8 questions.
Yeah, thank you.
And I assume that it... I don't know, does it go up at 8 o'clock?
Well, we recorded at 8 o'clock, actually,
fun.
for CST.
Do you record in a train station?
No, actually, it's a reference to in Animal Crossing, KK shows up at 8 p.m. at the train station.
Oh! I did not know that that's what that was a reference to.
Yes, exactly. Oh. And we did it for the original and not New Leaf, because honestly, Club LOL at 8 just didn't have the same.
I never even considered
didn't
that.
Have the same tone.
Why didn't we name this podcast Club LOL?
Can I share a quick story, a sad story about the original Animal Crossing?
Sure, of course.
Okay, so I bought a GameCube, and I'm sorry, I'm starting to eat my dinner because we went a little long. So that'd be really rude right now. So I bought a GameCube specifically because I was holding off on getting a GameCube, and then when Animal Crossing and Eternal Darkness had both come out, I decided that it was finally time to get a GameCube. So I started playing Animal Crossing, and I was so into it, and I loved it so much. And of course you could cheat it by like changing the clock on your system or something and make things happen that way, but it never crossed my mind to do something like that because I was sort of I was sort of living my life around the things that were going to happen in Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
So
Same page.
New Year's Eve came, and I had an opportunity to not be at home for New Year's Eve, but I decided that I wanted to be at home for New Year's Eve so I could spend it with my animals.
That's amazing.
I am a very sad human being, but it was a delightful night. So,
But anyway, other things we're working on would be Whales Are Whales, the network that Train Station at 8 actually lives underneath. And we have other cool shows there at whalesforwhales.com, and maybe all you people out there should go check it out and see if you like more stuff by us, if you're not already tired of hearing us talk.
I'm bored.
Yeah, I know. Even I'm bored, and I'm like the co-creator of this stupid podcast. Anyway.
I like your sales pitch, Stephen. It's really good.
Yeah, no problem,
totally.
Brian. I've been working on it all day.
Yep, they're the best podcasts ever.
Except for GameSpot gameplay.
Yes, of course.
No, I think this is the best podcast ever. I'm good with that.
Okay, cool.
Thanks, and I now have you recorded saying that, so I can...
We're just going to play it at the beginning of every episode now.
I'm Kevin VanOrd, and I approve of this podcast.
Thank
Best
you.
podcast in the Citadel.
That is great. We are definitely using that again.
And
All
yeah,
right.
we have gone pretty long, so we'll let Kevin get back to finishing his dinner instead of forcing him
Yeah.
to eat it while he's on the podcast. We're the worst hosts ever.
Oh, I'm done.
Even worse.
I'm teasing.
Yeah, so...
All right.
brings
Yeah,
up-
we should, far be it from us to hold up the Ukrainian Prime Minister from his important duties.
Well, it's important. I have important Olympic business to get back to.
Exactly. So anyway, thank you everyone for joining us. And as I always say at the end of this episode, give back your seat. We really need a better outro.
Yeah, we need a way better catchphrase. Eventually we'll think one up.
Yeah. Because we offer them a seat at the beginning. What are we supposed to say? Get out? Go away? We're closing.
Give up your seat actually sounds a little
Racist?
I don't know. But like it is a little risque.
Yeah, that's a
Like
really
depending
good
on
point.
circumstance,
Yeah.
that may not be the thing that you want to.
Oh man, I had a good one yesterday. It was like, please get your tickets or something. Now it's eluded me. I guess I'll just go with ook ook. Quote the monkey conductor.
Yeah, the monkey porter from Animal Crossing, my favorite character.
So now that we've labored over how to end this, I'm gonna
This brainstorming session has been delightful.
I have it with every guest, actually. So, alright. I'm gonna let you eat dinner now. So bye, everybody. See you
Thanks for listening.
next week.